Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Healthcare Inspired Podcast. My name is Jennifer McNamara, and I am your host. I would like to welcome my co-host, Maya Turner. Welcome, Maya.
Hello, everybody. Hello.
Hi. We're back, and I know I've been on this roller coaster of just traveling in the month of September. Here we are, October 2nd. We're in the official fall. For me, October is like the fall month.
Yes.
I've always thought of yeah, exactly. I've always thought of November as like getting into the winter side, but October is my fall. That's when I like to do all the fall stuff. And but September was kind of crazy. I was just gone so much. I'm so tired, but I'm so happy to be getting back into routine. I think sometimes we just we go, and then we stop, and then we realize, okay, now what? So that's how I feel right now. Like, what do I do next?
Right. Been there, done that. I was in 3 states in 3 days last week, so it was not the prettiest sight, because every other day or every day I was on a plane, and then I spoke at the Healthcare Finance Management Association in Columbus, and then I was involved with an arbitration. So it was it was really busy, and I was just like, doesn't have to all be on the same week. Why is it all in the same week? But I'm back. I'm with my girl. We're talking compliance. That's what we do. So here we are again.
Absolutely. Well, season 4 is about compliance. So you're going to obviously be seeing a lot of compliance talk. Compliance First will always be floating across the screen here live for us. And I just really enjoy compliance. And I never thought I would. I think back to when I first started in healthcare. I remember the compliance department would come in, they would check your computers, or really, like, it was almost that fear, right? It's compliance is here. Make sure your computers are locked, or make sure nothing's visible that shouldn't be there, and the protocols and all of that. I know I worked in a hospital setting most of my career up until like 5-6 years ago. And I know you are similar, working for these health systems, and it's a very like different dynamic. And when I switched and started working for practices in consulting for healthcare practices, independent practices, I realized how little they knew about compliance, because I came from two entities, two hospital systems in my career that they had it down, and they had really strong compliance directors, compliance officers for the hospital, different people that handled different things, and we knew who they were. We respected them, and there was a really good culture of compliance, I felt, overall.
Right. Culture of compliance is a luxury, but it's a necessity for all involved. But having the culture of compliance is definitely a luxury. Unfortunately, everybody is not have a mindset of keeping the law.
Very, very true. It really, really is. It is so true. And when I think about what I learned this week, so for instance, when I look at where I've been, so I went to, first of all, the first thing I went to when I was gone was in early September. I went to Vegas for the Healthcare Advocate Summit, and then came home for a break. And then I went to the Ascent Conference, which is for the administrators for ear, nose, and throat otolaryngology. And I had the privilege of finally meeting in person. Shout out to Sean Weiss. I've been wanting to meet that guy for so long, because I've been following him and chatting with him over the last few years. And it was nice to meet him in person. I attended all his sessions at Ascent, and apparently it's one of his favorite conferences to speak at. So I'm excited that we're kind of both in the ENT world now. And so it was fun to hear from him. So I just have to tell everyone this experience I had, because he brought with him one of my favorite people that is on his podcast, Ron Chapman, and one of the coolest lawyers out there. I'm telling you what, he's super cool.
Very cool.
And their dynamic was so chill, and they're friends, and they get along, and they're just cool, right? And so they made compliance just really come alive to those that were in their sessions. So we went to a 4-hour boot camp. It's a lot, right? It's a lot of compliance from morning till lunchtime, but we had a great time digging into what we see out there. They dug into some of the cases that they've covered over the last several years that really go into, fraud and some of the things that we deal with on the business side of healthcare. But again, it's something that I think that going back to what the topic is today, communication in compliance, those communication errors or issues or lack of efficiency are what cause compliance violations. And when you think about when it comes from point A to point B, there's a policy that exists. There's maybe tons of policies, but the communication as to what they actually say and has your team actually reviewed them? Are they following through on the policies themselves? Do you have evidence of them following them? And that goes back to communication. So like one of the things they mentioned, and we know this to be true on our side. I mean, we are compliance consultants. We know compliance policies are living, breathing documents. That means they don't sit on a shelf and just stay there and collect dust. They have to be used and utilized and maintained, and the constantly flowing of information that gets updated as things change. So that's where I think we run into problems, and then we run into people that actually don't have a compliance plan, that didn't even know they needed one.
Right. Yeah. And I also think
that becomes
there's an issue. Right. I mean, we all have seen, and I say this a million times over, the culture of compliance is a luxury. The necessity of compliance is ongoing. And to not have the two can create a lot of problematic issues, quite a bit, especially when you have no clue. It's just like, I didn't know I was supposed to have a policy. You're like, where have you been? Where have you been? But that's okay. Let's remove the rock that you've been under and get you out of the rock.
Exactly. So let's get you out of that little hiding place you've been in, let you see the world as it really is. It's like you can't pretend things aren't happening and hope they go away. It's like sometimes, yes, I would like my bills to go away. I would like to just wish it away. Like, I don't want to pay this today. But it doesn't work that way. It doesn't just go away because you wish it away, right?
Right.
It doesn't happen that way. And last season, we really focused on our leaders, and that is management, but also those who have the leadership mindset. But let's talk about those in charge, those who have a team under them they're managing, compliance officers as well. I have seen organizations where the compliance officers really don't understand their job. And they were hired as a compliance officer. Maybe they were put in that role because they needed to fill that role, and they just put somebody there because they needed a compliance officer just to satisfy the requirement. But that person really doesn't understand what they're supposed to be doing. And so things fall through the cracks. There's communication. Of course, one of the compliance elements we'll talk about later in the season is, of course, education when we get to that element. But today I just want to focus on the communication part. We're going to talk about, as we go through, some of the elements. And of course, we definitely want everyone to be aware of the Inspired Compliance Seminar that is happening in December. We encourage everyone to scan the QR code if you're listening live, watching live. And please go to our website, healthcareinspiredllc.com. and register today. We have some great speakers. Some of the speakers you know very well. We have Christine Hall, Rhonda Buckholz. We have the amazing Susan Wahlberg, who literally wrote the book on compliance. We have Don Self, who I just got back from St. Louis attending his Denials to Dollars seminar with Carlene Dietrich and Chris Chapman. It was absolutely fabulous. I learned things I will never forget. My brain is still full from all of the stuff I learned on ERISA. And all these laws that we have to maneuver through so we can manage the denials and hold insurance companies accountable. So it was so much fun. So Don's going to talk about some of that too in his presentation. You're going to love it. And we have Melissa Kirshner. We have so many people. Jolivet Williams. We have Sonal Patel, Betty Hovey. It's an all-star cast, guys. So you do not want to miss it. I'll be there too. I'm there too. I'll be speaking as well, but I more want to push my friends because they are just so amazing. I love to share their knowledge with the world because not everyone gets to hear them speak all the time. So I like to get these people that I respect and value so much out there in the world so you can hear from them. And so hopefully you can join that seminar. It's virtual, of course. You're going to get CEUs for that. It's going to be a great day, great fun. Okay, so going back into our topic of communication, I want to go into our next segment. And it's a team effort, right? So compliance isn't a one person thing where the compliance officer just shouts out orders and you're gonna lose your job because you don't follow the rules. Now you might eventually lose your job if you systematically violate regulations and you put the organization at risk. You could lose your job. But we want to focus on the positive, and that is bringing teams together and bringing them together through compliance. So, Maya, how would you envision this to happen? Give me like your thoughts on bringing a team together through compliance. How would you build teamwork through compliance?
I think part of a successful collaboration is understanding what everybody's strengths are, right? Mm-hmm. And then you would then in turn think about what the ultimate goal is, right? What is the goal? What is the issue? What are the people who have strengths in compliance? Some may be able to understanding this type of role. Some may be involved with this type of role. So you kind of want to get everybody who has their own strengths and then put them all in one big huddle and delegate those responsibilities and communicating what those responsibilities are. And once that happens, create a plan and actively be involved with what that plan is and make sure you follow through with what the plan is and make sure that every task is carried out to the letter. I think part of being a leader is the attention to detail, but also the follow through when there's a problem. You can't have a problem, say you'll take it on and have no follow through. So I think part of that is, having all these different people involved, get their strengths together, create a plan. Once that plan is in place, have a method of attack for issues and then follow through to the letter until it's resolved. And re-communicate with everything that is involved with that problem. What did you have when you tried to do this? What is this issue? How did you address it? How do we address it as a whole? So not only is it about understanding what those problems are, but tracking communication as well as the issues and the method of resolve for those issues while you're trying to resolve that one problem that comes at hand.
Absolutely. And for compliance officers, you're not just focused on the business side. You have clinical teams that you have to also be in charge of, the building compliance, the actual physical location, all the things that go into making a practice work. And, I'm going to focus today on talking about our practices. Hospital compliance is a whole nother issue. There's a lot there we can't touch today. It's like a whole nother gamut there. But like, you and I, Maya, and our team, we work a lot with clients on credentialing. So we have to have compliance standards there when we're gathering documents. We're looking at collaboration agreements that exist between our non-physician practitioners and our physicians. And is it current? Things like that. Do we have their current licenses? Those are things that are related to reimbursement, but they're also related to the fact that the physician is legally allowed to practice medicine. And we know what has happened with these cases that we've heard of in the past, because that has been not followed through on, or some physician really hurt somebody because they ignored some of these checks and balances that are part of compliance. So that on the patient safety side. So going into the business side, there's a lot of things that we need to be aware of as compliance officers, and in general, making sure the teams that perform tasks understand what their responsibilities are, because a lot of people aren't ethical and they want to do what's right. They just don't have the training and they don't have the knowledge to understand when something's right or wrong, because maybe they come from an organization where they did things one way and they didn't know any better because they just thought that was the way things were done. They didn't have They didn't on their own go and dig out a policy and verify that what they were being told was correct. So then they get to this new
Right.
organization and they don't understand why they're being asked to do that. It doesn't make any sense, right? So example, case in
Yeah.
point, this happens all the time with modifier 25. So I know there's going to be a lot of people out there rolling their eyes, shaking their head, like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Because, and I guess I was in a bubble because I was always told and trained the right way to understand modifier 25. And then when I get to these organizations and I realize, and people are telling me they're told to just slap it on there to get it paid, I really just have this kind of crazy feeling of what is really right or wrong, right?
Right. I mean, it's called an ethical and moral fiber. It's always ingrained. When something is right, your spidey sense goes off, and you're like, I don't feel comfortable doing that. So you always have a method of approach, or you have a sense of to know that something is wrong. So it um it encourages you to find out if it's right. So you continually have this thing. It doesn't go away. It's just part of your inner being, and because of that's why you check. You say, well, that doesn't seem right. So that's why they have fact checkers, right? So because you want to know if it's
Yes.
right. So mhm.
Yeah, and you have every right to question a supervisor when you know that what they're telling you to do violates a clear policy. And there may be that fear of like, okay, I'm going to lose my job, but they can't legally fire you. I mean, you have recourse. um, they can't legally fire you for doing the right thing. Um, you know, I don't want to throw out the word whistleblower, but you have those rights. You have the rights to call out when something's being violated. And compliance officers need to also be holding others in the organization accountable to that. You can't be afraid of someone higher than you potentially, because you are the compliance officer. It is your responsibility. That role exists to control the risk in the organization. So everyone should know and respect the compliance officer, that that's their job. Don't make them feel bad because they had to come to you with some issue. Figure out where the issue came from and fix it. If it's an attitude issue, adjust the attitude. Make them understand that we're a team and we need to work together. So for instance, with
Right.
modifier 25, a lot of white noise out there is coming from so many directions on what is right and wrong. But as an organization, it's your responsibility to know what is right and wrong, what's true. So you get the payer policy out. How does the payer feel? How do they want you to understand modifier 25? It's a modifier
Right.
that is in your CPT codebook. It's in the AMA manual. This is true. But the actual definition and the intent of that modifier is not how it's carried out in 2024. It is not carried
Right.
out the way it was intended by payers. They have their own
Right.
way of interpreting it. So when we go
Yeah. And
into
the
that
AMA
modifier,
published something.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was going to say the AMA published something on Modifier 25. I believe it was August of last year.
Mhm.
There was a white paper that they wrote about Modifier 25 and its uses after they updated some of the places of service that were related to multiple services on the same day. So,
Yeah.
the AMA has given a position, and when we trained, remember when we trained for coding, they didn't give you any guidance on modifiers in the CPT book. Now you see it all
Mm-mm.
through the book, and it's just like, wait a minute, we didn't get
Yeah.
any of this training. So,
Yeah, we
I
had
just
the
think that
trial and error.
right.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
days.
So it's just really refreshing to see that now they're adding that piece, because before it was like it's not even there anymore. But now when we were trained, but now it's all throughout the CPT book. So there's no lack of knowledge in that regard. And CMS also has all the different Medicare administrative contractors also have data that are related to proper uses of modifiers. So there's no shortage of references on how to use it and how payers are looking at it on how to use it.
Yes, and I have one of my clients who I just adore. They are in the dermatology space, and their compliance officer is just so on it. I just love her to death. And so she showed me her modifier 25 policy they have, because it's very unique. And the OIG has, of course, in recent years, has definitely come out with a law on modifier 25 for dermatology. And so she has a really awesome policy that they've created for the organization. And some organizations don't even think about doing that. having a
Yeah.
specific policy for their specialty on nuances that exist for them. Because one thing I learned also at the seminar with Sean Weiss and Ron Chapman is a lot of people don't realize, you can say, I can code anything. I can code E&M for any specialty, but you can't say that if you don't know that specialty, because coding E&M is not the same from one specialty to the next. You need to know the
It is
anatomy.
not.
You have to
Yes.
understand disease process, physician thought process, understand how different procedures come into play, when they're appropriate, when they're not, as far as using modifier 25, all those dynamics. And so you can't just say, I can code anything. I can audit anything. You have to know that
Right.
specialty. So it's really important that auditors you hire, you can confirm that they truly
And I
know that
also have to say,
specialty. Yeah,
no, I was just going to say that I have
but
to say, just based on your experience with the dermatology compliance officer, that not all compliance officers are created equal. They are not, and because they are not, you
mhm,
have people who are placed in a position to oversee compliance, but they may not have a knowledge worth, you know, to get any type of certification with, because not all compliance officers are certified. Not all compliance officers are no coding. They are just the go-to person that somebody appointed. So you got to be really
right.
careful. And if they don't know, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, is that if they don't know, the point is to provide them with resources if something doesn't seem right and is based upon a decision that may not have been educated. So,
Hmm.
everything is an evolving process when it comes to compliance, and especially when you have a person who was delegated to be an officer who doesn't necessarily know all of the regulations associated with compliance.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I want to do a shout out. We have Sonda Kunze on watching today. I just love her, so I want to say hello to Sonda. Thank you so much for joining in. I just love your posts and what you do. So I want to shout out to you. And you are correct, Maya. I mean, there's just so much that they don't know, and I think that when it excuse me, I think that when it comes to building policies, you really have to understand your organization, how you function, and make it understandable too. Because there's policies out there that are so filled with legal jargon that the average person can't understand it. So if your team is supposed to follow this policy and they can't understand what it says, how are they going to follow it? It's like learning a foreign language. You could be talking to someone from Italy and they are just go talking how they talk, and they're thinking you understand them. They're just going to keep going, but the look on your face should tell them they have no idea. You have no idea what they're talking about, right? And so the same thing is like you look at your people and you're expecting them to just be able to follow these things, and they're like looking at you with like a blank face, like they have no idea what you're talking about, because
Mhm,
they
mhm.
maybe tried to read the policy, they could not understand what it was talking about, so they maybe just didn't want to say they didn't understand for fear
Yeah,
of
yeah,
whatever. So don't do that to your staff. Make sure that they have policies they can understand, because that's the goal, right? You want them to
yeah.
actually follow the policy. So just make
Right.
sure they understand it. That is really the key. Make it a living, breathing document that can be monitored and changed, and you don't just copy a template from the internet and slap your logo on it, right?
Right. And I also
Because
think that,
you may
you
just do that.
right. I mean, and I think you hit something that's really pertinent, right? Compliance and understanding compliance is a language. Just like coders
Mhm.
understand the language of medicine and translates that to numbers, compliance is the language of regulation and how that is communicated with everybody involved. So if we take that perspective and we put ourselves in a position to understand compliance and the role of how it's translated to everyone that's involved, then we have a common language that everybody can understand and interpret when it's put into policy for people to understand and follow through.
Right. And at the conference, the seminar, you're going to get practical tips on some of the policies that you need to have. So we have the amazing Susan Wahlberg, who is going to be up first talking about the policies and the creation of policies. So you're going to learn about some of the standard policies you should have So I think a lot of organizations, they actually need to understand they don't even know what policies they should have. So it'll be nice for you to hear from Susan at the seminar of what policies you should have, and she's going to help you create kind of like an semblance of what you should have, give you a checklist, and so that'll be nice. And then one of the other things I want to talk about, a common compliance violation that people don't think about, is the copay collection. I've talked about it several times, and this goes back to a communication issue, because what sometimes happen in practices I've been in and that I've helped, where the physician's talking to the patient and they're telling the physician, they're talking about finances, right? And it comes into the conversation. The physician's like, oh, no charge today, right? And then the patient goes up to the desk and says, oh, the physician said I didn't have to pay. So then I'm like, okay, breathe, Jennifer. So then I have to have a conversation with my physician, and I have to say, no. I love you to death. You do a great work. You're great with the patients, but let me handle these conversations. So that's how you need to handle that. And you need someone up front who can be assertive without being rude. Okay. So you can be assertive, and maybe that at that moment in time, you can't collect it because of this serious situation that's occurred. So you don't want to be rude to the patient. So you say, well, we will get back to you on that, or however you say it. If you want to let them go today, and just say, well, I'll have to discuss it with the physician based on our policy, however you want to say it, find some way to make sure the patient knows it's not the end of the story in a nice way. Talk to your manager, get them involved. Even if you have to get the compliance officer involved, you may have to, but there needs to be a communication, because that's a communication gap where they are not following through with the policy that exists. And so the physicians have to equally be held accountable for things that they do that affect the reimbursement and affect compliance policies that exist, because the Office of Inspector General has covered this many years ago, and they have not changed their stance on the fact that you have a contract with your insurance carrier. You are required to collect that cost sharing. It is no different. The patient signed a contract too. One of the things I always say to the patient is that, unfortunately, it is against the law for me to not collect your copay. I'm very upfront with it. And you also signed a contract with your insurance that you would pay this. So if you can't pay today, we can make arrangements for you to pay within 30 days, however you want to say it. Or if there's a hardship going on, it does allow for a case-by-case basis to, interpret that situation. But I'm going to tell you guys, I've been in a situation as a registration tech in the past, and my manager would always tell me I love her to death. Her name was Kelly. I just love her. She goes, that lady couldn't pay her copay? Well, she's got a Coach purse and she's got some fancy nails. She has to pay her copay today. So like, she knew those patients, and she knew with the ones that were trying to get away with it. And I just loved to death. It's like, I learned that from her, is you can't always trust the patient saying that they don't have the money when they can afford a Coach purse and they can afford to get their nails done. It's a priority thing, right? They can afford it. That may be the reason why they don't have a copay. Maybe that's why. They might have spent their money on Exactly, right? Oh my gosh. So that it happens, right? So you have to find a way to communicate, but everyone should know how it's working and how it should work. Have a regular meeting. Now, a lot of organizations put together compliance committees, which you should have. Every organization should have a compliance committee that really is made up of several people in different departments, which is nowadays what we call, they also have these revenue integrity teams that are built from different departments. But you should also have a compliance committee that's built from different people that have a stake in the company, in the organization, that are required to understand these things, because if you don't follow them, their name is mud, basically. Yeah. That's what I like to say.
Yeah.
So those are a couple things I want to shout out to, is, having living, breathing policies, thinking about these communication gaps that create violations. And then our compliance checklist tip for this episode, we're going to start having some compliance checklist tips for you every episode. I want to talk, as we close this out, on managing the exclusion lists. Now, for those of you out there listening that don't know what this is, you normally, yes, when you hire someone, it's customary and should be done. You should do a background check Most large organizations have a standard policy on that. I'm finding some smaller organizations that necessarily don't do it because they don't really feel they need to. They trust the person. You can't trust people these days, guys. I'm sorry. You can't go into life thinking you can trust everyone. We don't live in that kind of world, unfortunately. I wish we did. I hope one day we do. And I think one day we will, but for now, we don't actually live in that kind of world. And then there's also the extra thing in healthcare that we do is we check the OIG's exclusion list. That, again, OIG stands for the Office of Inspector General, and they manage several things. But again, they are going to let you know if an individual you are about to hire has violated some policy, they've gotten in trouble with the law, and they're not allowed to bill Medicare. So physicians. It also actually filters down into employees who are on the exclusion list, who by nature can't touch anything related to any Medicare beneficiary, any federal payer, right? So
yes.
How do we stay compliant? What should we do as a process, Maya, to make sure this happens and doesn't fall through the cracks?
Well, I think there's, first of all, I'm trying my best not to burst at the seams when we talk about exclusions. That's the first thing, because there's so many layers. It's like onions, like in Shrek. Shrek's like my favorite. Layer, yeah. So many layer. And one of the things that you got to be cognizant of is, one, checking, and then two, checking the list. And like, it's everybody. It's not just, physicians. Exclusions list is not limited to physicians. It's anybody who will touch a payment, anybody who will check eligibility, anybody who has anything to do with any type of government issued or federally issued, state issued funding, right? Anything, right? And so the first thing is to check. The second thing is to know what the violation is once they find out, right? There is civil penalties that's associated with someone who touches money for each act. So think about, and there are times when you don't know. And when you don't know, you don't know. But you still have to return the money by voluntarily returning the money if it happens. But for each account, it's up to $10,000, right? And then it's multiplied for each act. So if someone is knowingly employed and they're on the exclusions list, you have a certain amount of time and then you can return the money. Okay, all right, good. But that doesn't eliminate you from policies because you still did it. You still did it ignorantly. So, I think, and you might want to ask, well, how do you check? You have to check the list. It's published. It's published by the state. Each state has a list of exclusions list. And if they're on that list, that's why they call them background checks.
Yes, it's part of the process. So on hiring, if you're thinking about hiring someone today, tomorrow, the next few weeks, make it a priority. It's part of the enrollment process. HR should already be all over it. And then you check it regularly throughout their employment. Now, if they've been employed with you for a long time and you've never done it, now's the time to do it. Hopefully you're good. But just because you haven't done it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it now. So don't waste time. Do it now. Get it done. Have all your employees checked. Physicians, staff, yourself. Have somebody else check you. But again, make sure that you're not on that list. And
you pass background checks for a reason, right? You pass them for a reason, right? You pass it for a reason. They check for a reason. So
yes,
I just can't, without bursting at the seams, do a check.
Yeah, and we have actually, as part of our credentialing software that we use, it has an automatic exclusion list check, and so it'll notify us if someone's name comes across and we have to verify, because sometimes the name is like similar and it's not the person, but we just have to verify it, because it will even notify us. It's so smart that it thinks it's that person, so we have to go in and check, okay, is it really true? And then we have to notify the organization that this came across. So there's a whole process to that, because we do facility credentialing for hospitals, which includes the hospital side, hospital-based physicians, and in the clinic-based physicians. So there's a lot to manage. And so you got to stay compliant. You need to get everyone involved. HR, of course, should be there from the onboarding process. Supervisors need to know, have a copy of it. You should have it in the packet that comes with their enrollment into the organization, their onboarding. And then when they go to a department, the HR needs to give that supervisor access to their file with all their documents, hiring documents. There should be a protocol as to what the supervisor needs to have, and that needs to be one of them. They need to have on file that the person that they're managing is not on the exclusions list. They need to know about it. And so make sure you're doing this regularly. Right. Again, obviously at onboarding, obviously at the initial hiring, and then regularly throughout their employment. So that's it, guys. That's our tip for this week. And we're looking forward to.
Now, I was just going to say that the exclusions list is not forever. No, the exclusions list is not forever. So if someone appears on the exclusions list, it's not like it's their chain for life. They can get removed from the exclusions list. So, if something happens, they're aware of it. Oh, I know I'm the exclusions list. I'm working on it. There's something that happened, blah, 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 blah. But just be mindful of that when it happens. And be mindful of people who've broken the law. That also could be a part of them touching the government funds when it comes to the exclusions list. That's all I wanted to add.
Yes. And there's when we do compliance, we for credentialing, we always have to report, let them know when we send enrollment into the payer, if there's a malpractice claim out there for a physician. There's things like that. They have to be aware. So we have to be full transparency on everything. And so the more transparent you are, the less risk you're inviting on your organization. So it's just a good idea to be aware of that. And so we're going to continue our conversation next week. And next week we have a fun episode. It's going to be Maya's turn to kind of run the show. So we're going to have a episode on telehealth compliance. So I'm excited to talk about telehealth compliance and all the fun stuff. We're going to talk about just some things from etiquette to billing to where we are today, where we're headed in the next few months, and what to watch for as far as updates that might be coming through. Because as we get forward more into December, we are up against a potential expiration date for some things. So we want to watch for that, and also keep our eyes out in the next couple months for the final rule to see how things play out there. So we want to give you some updates on telehealth and how compliance comes into play and what you can do to plan for those specific things. And if you decide to go virtual as a virtual provider, what you need to know as far as scope of practice and things like that. So fun stuff coming next week. We'll talk to you guys then. Yes. So have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you, guys.